So I ask you this, we're still a couple weeks away from the trade deadline. Are they done, and could they potentially be after a defenseman? And how much stock do you put into Kyle Dubas's conversation following the trade about not wanting to subtract from his roster?
Well, I don't think they're done, but it's going to be hard to make the next move, no matter, even if it's something smaller. I mean, between the cap ramification things that they have to deal with, even if they just don't have a lot of picks, right? They're down to only a couple picks in the 2023 draft. They don't have their second rounder in 2024 or 2025 now. There's still things they can do, don't get me wrong, but there's not a lot of obvious things for them to deal unless they are, either dealing a prospect or perhaps someone off the roster. And so I think that they'll look at everything, but they might ultimately find that there's just not upgrades out there. I mean, because if you're trading for someone right now, you've got to feel either that player is better than someone in your lineup or that you need a depth option. I don't think they actually need a depth option on D. I think you could argue that they need an upgrade in the top six. But, what are you subtracting? Like if you went out and tried to get Matthias Ekholm or, any of the guys, Jacob Chikrin's name's out there, and I don't think the Leafs have much interest in him. But the point is, if you're getting players that would obviously still, make the Leafs top six with the current guys, those are usually 2 first-rounders is the ask going back. And the Leafs, I'm not sure if you really want to trade 2 first-rounders into the future at this point. So the truth of the matter is, I think the biggest splash has been made. It would be a huge surprise to me if they made a bigger trade than the one they made last Friday. But I think that their mind is open to doing whatever they can do because we all know how much is riding on this season, and they still have 10 days where they can make a deal here. I mean, why would you close up shop just yet? I think you got to explore the market. Maybe some of the prices come down, and maybe something falls into line that makes a team better. Heading into the stretch drive.
Yeah, and Chris, as he says, he doesn't want to take away from his own roster, and we're talking about draft picks and whatnot. It seems like that's kind of going to be one of the main things, if not the only thing, going out the door. And that, I mean, you mentioned that no one's really upset about this O'Reilly trade. Only thing I've seen is people going, "You're giving up a lot of picks. You're giving up a lot of picks." But it's like, it's shit or get off the pot. Do you want to win this year? Or are you making a push? Because if you go, I'm not going to make that deal to make my team better because I don't want to give up that first rounder who may or may not make us do what exactly where we are right now in 5 years. Like it's do or die. And it seems like Dubas is making a run at it. And why wouldn't you when you're top 3-4 in the whole league all year long? But I think people lose fact of the sight that Matthew Nyes could be an addition that you don't have to do anything with, just allow him to walk in. And the only thing I see that could maybe work is just add some kind of a defenseman somehow and maybe some prospects or a couple more picks or something for that. But it seems like it's hard to be going to be hard to do anything else at this point. What do you see happening if they do make a deal?
Well, and I'm with you on the draft pick conversation. Like, look, the Leafs first rounder this year is going to fall somewhere between 24 and 32 probably.
Yeah. And
if you look historically, there's certainly good players that have been drafted in that range, but often they're not becoming good players for 5 or 6 years down the road. Truly impactful players at the NHL level. I mean, 5 or 6 years from now, who knows what's left of this Leafs roster, what this looks like. And so, any team that's had any amount of success in the last 10 years, whether it's Chicago, Pittsburgh, LA, any of these teams, Tampa, that has hung banners in their rink or multiple banners, that they've traded away a ton of first round picks because they recognize it was worth selling the future to make the present better when they had some special players on the roster. And I think that's, it's just a prudent thing to do. It's basically a second rounder almost going for O'Reilly, especially if the Leafs do win a couple rounds in the playoffs. It gets pushed lower and lower. You have to give up a second, essentially the equivalent of a second for Achari. There was a lot of contending teams that had interest in him as a ninth depth addition for their third or fourth line. And then, there's a third round pick going out there because there's salary retention and a fourth round pick. Because anyway, the point is that's a total market value trade, no matter how you slice it. Now another team might have looked at that and said, we wouldn't want to pay that for O'Reilly, and that's their prerogative. But I think that it's totally in line with what we've seen in other deals. And so where that leaves the Leafs now, I think you're right. I mean, we're probably looking at a depth move unless, Kyle Dubas is once again sort of, trying to get us off the scent by saying that he doesn't want to trade off his roster. I mean, if he trades something off his roster, there's players in the final year of their deals, whether it's Alex Kerfoot, Justin Hall, Pierre Engvall, David Kampf, all these guys are on expiring deals. And if you traded their salary away, you could create room to bring in something back. If they're really not doing that, then I think we're down to a depth addition in terms of another trade. And then, as you mentioned, Matthew Nyes, I would expect to be pulling on a Leaf sweater within days of the last game for the University of Minnesota next month. So, the team is more or less set, unless something else just comes out of the clear blue sky. But I think that they're smart to get ahead of the deadline. It gives the guys themselves an extra week and a half to get a little more comfortable coming into play with the team. And then it just takes some of the pressure off those last 2 days when, sometimes things go wrong on March 3rd. You play with fire if you get close to that deadline and something falls through and you don't have a backup plan, then you might end up with nothing. I mean, at least at this point, the Leafs, I think, have really made themselves better. And, my final word, too, on the price is that I think there's a world where Ryan O'Reilly stays in Toronto. Now, it's premature to have that talk, but I know for certain that he's on their list of teams that he likes. He wanted to come here and play here. If this is a positive experience, they might have given that up, not for a rental player. And who knows, maybe they even somewhere along the line get him to take a little less than the market might pay him, the way they did with Mark Giordano. I mean, that remains a possibility here, and that's part of the sort of intangible benefit of this move as well.